Good evening, all. This is Rillian for Team 2_MK, rebroadcasting content from my own Rillian 2_MK channel to the main 2_MK channel used by the team, obviously with my full permission. Today we're looking at the BlankaBot prototype and probably actually playing some Sandbag casuals, maybe to see what other players are doing with Blanka, and maybe just to pass some time, and to test the servers, since I specifically have been having some trouble lately with getting matches to actually complete, and it seemed like the sort of problem that's most likely not so much my internet as something on the Capcom side, and with the most recent update we might see something have changed. But for now, for the sake of having a clean start to the stream, we're going to be looking through some of the BlankaBot stuff. I won't go into details of the inputs because the inputs have been changed very slightly from our Proto Blanka stream last week. Mostly additions to make sure that everything is available. All of his moves are in one way or another, or at least most of them, because it's hard to get all of them in. Generally, this bot should be used with his critical gauge at normal, at least at first, because you're trying to learn to punish the regular version of his roll quite a lot of the time. But he can keep his V meter at auto recover, and you don't need to worry about that. Since the point system is a little bit at flux at the moment, I'm going to be leaving my health in auto recover, and I'm starting with Karine today, who I have very little full experience with. Tactically, I know how to play her, but I don't specifically play Karine. Blanka will be on his V-Trigger 2 at first. This isn't specifically because the bot is intended to be used on V-Trigger 2. We're still deciding whether or not to limit it to one or the other. But we are definitely using that first because it's the relatively more limited one in terms of what you can get a bot to do with it. Blanka's second V-Trigger has a lot of things that relate to holding a particular direction while using the button, which takes a while to build into a bot. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of very perfect inputs and variants to make sure that's working. So he only really has one V-Trigger input right now. So he's more effective in, I believe, V-Trigger 1 normally. So when he has no meter, he should be doing heavy roll forward. He also has light roll forward, but you won't see it as much. There's a specific input required to get that one, and it's not likely. So having talked to the team about what they're interested in seeing, understanding about the character and so on, prompted me to start with Karine. So already you can see that there is some difference here. Where Blanka bounces off when he does his roll changes based on a lot of things. So Karine can basically just hit heavy punch, but it won't hit every roll. There are some where he ends up close to you, and others where he doesn't. This makes him a very stressful character because even though you won't get hit when you do certain punishes, the ones that are meant to hit the one that ends close generally won't get you hurt if you do it against the far one. You do lose out on your ability to punish him, which is one of the things that's always made the character interesting. In order to punish Blanka, you probably have to either be fully confident or risk giving up your punish on something. Blanka usually has the option of making sure you can't punish him consistently, but if you do, then it works out for you. One of the things I definitely made sure to give the bot is something of a small mix-up where he does his surprise forward, goes past you, and immediately does electricity. This isn't specifically because electricity is too hard to react to, but because the move is plus, if you were not expecting the surprise forward, and therefore get caught in that, and just say, oh, and panic block, you don't really have an option. You are going to be under Blanka pressure from there. His ability to stop you from reacting to certain things, and the fact that when you're in the air, since he basically has no collision bots during surprise forward, your moves influence where he ends up relative to you. You can't be absolutely sure where he will end up if he happened to do it in the recovery of one of your moves. You actually have to learn this slowly over time. There's some good stuff that Blanka players will probably get people on just because of this. So I'm consistently hitting the one that goes straight up. And just to check that goes under. Now I've already understood somewhat about how I need to do this, so I'm already partially confirming which one he did. This is something that might be hard to practice though. One of the things that's important here is that you are in a lot of block stun off that roll, even though it's not so obvious. You have a lot of time. If you are able to let yourself calm down enough to realize that you have a lot of time, that you are in a long, relatively long block stun, you can use that to identify which move you should do. Now my execution obviously with this move is not so great because, as I said, I don't play Kareen. I could probably do it better with like something else, but my general spacing for this is a little off. But I understand this character enough to go a little further than most people can go early, even though I haven't fought the bot himself that much yet. As he stands now, there's no specific reason why you shouldn't be able to treat that as a point system if you are testing out our prototype and helping us. So for now, let's consider that. When Blanka rolls at you and you block it, he's either going to bounce more or less straight up or fairly far back. And if you need a punish with a special to get the far back one, you can in fact, you are in block stun for so long, in fact you have to try to get yourself not to try to react too early, which is what I'm having trouble with here. As you can see, he has his command throw. He decided to demonstrate twice. Those are, however, not missed executions. That one was. But a lot of the time, I am recognizing that he is out far, and it is causing me to react differently to the move itself. You have quite a lot of time to decide that, especially if you're playing a character like Kareen who has the ability to decide halfway into a given move whether or not she really wants to finish it. But let's try using Mayokin instead to show what happens when you don't have that option. Mujin Kyaku is a little weird, so I won't be doing that. And for now, you can actually watch how long I can mash that button. On hit, I'll hit a light in between there so you can see. I can pretty much assure you that it's only on the third of those that anything is coming out. If you watch really carefully, you'll realize the block stun is rather long because I can hit that button 3 times after he's made contact and no move comes out. So please be aware that the block stun for that move is much longer than you'd think. This is super important for people who have execution problems and have a move that specifically requires like a special input rather than just a button to punish that. It's incredibly important for any charge character who needs to punish that move by doing something like spinning bird kick or Fang's Nishikyu or something similar, because you are likely to give up your charge too early and have a problem. Yes, a high level player or someone who is used to watching very much rather than having their emotions control that particular part of the match can generally visually confirm where Blanka has gone to some extent. In fact, if you get used to watching it, you are not out of block stun yet at the time you should be deciding which move to do. You have time to watch where Blanka went because that's part of the design, presumably. Generally, you should assume that if you are relatively familiar with these games, if you have the time to think about it, you should use that time. Blanka is keeping you in block stun for so long that if you feel your reactions are bad, you shouldn't stress too much about it. Take the time to watch and see where Blanka went, because you're probably still in block stun. The visual cue you use should be specific to you. Just decide whatever helps you see the best. And you should be able to decide whether or not to finish your move. In Kareen's case, it's partially that I get to hit the Seppo in either case, but you could do this with any character. For example, I can do it with her by just doing... Let's try using ES for Senha, for example. What I was supposed to do there was not hit the final buttons. To just go for the down, to back, and that's it. That is something you have to train yourself to do. But it's also possible to just train yourself not to do any move at all. You do have a lot of time for this though. You should not be expecting to see heavy ball a lot. But it does have a use against certain characters. Depending on your character, you can expect to see this move. Because if your character has a lot of punishes that only hit like this, rather than like that, Kareen has moves that hit up high and moves that hit. This hits fairly well, but still not enough that you could just generally make sure it's going to make any contact. But let's say that she faces this. Blanka lands on that, but that's because that move takes fairly long. As you can see, if I just jab and I mash it, it may look a little confusing, but even if he was actually high up, he won't get hit. He didn't have to go backward to not get hit by that. He could just be too high to hit. So, if you're panicking or trying to do things quickly because he's close, you want to make sure you start your punish combo as soon as possible. For the most part, if your punish combo starts with either a jab or a relatively low hitting button that's fast, I think I'll try her crouch medium kick and see what I get. See? Nothing. That worked because it was delayed. So if you are freaked out and mashing, you are in a big, dangerous situation. But if you use too slow a move, you are in a different dangerous situation. So for Kareen players specifically, or people who are used to punishing with crouch medium kick, be aware that you may face someone who knows how to deal with this, especially since that charge gives them enough time to charge their invincible EX vertical rolling. Or even to just land and immediately command throw you or something. You're going to face some dangerous situations that way. So the full intention at this time is to leave that in the bot so that you can get used to it. It's one of our more important inputs for him as a generality, so it's easy to keep. Another useful thing to note, but I don't know how to fully make it useful, is that for a footsie style character, his crouching medium punch is terrible. I will turn on the frame data advantage so that you can see this. It might take a little while, of course, for him to show it off. His target combo is decent, mainly because of the pushback. But that move is -3. It's not enough for you to punish, but in general, you don't have to worry about Blanka getting that whole crouch medium punch thing that we saw on the Monday Lounge. And I don't mean the fact that he can't hit it twice, because spacing and a bunch of other things help there, but he can't probably hit that button and then jump. And because his backdash is fairly bad, I didn't even bother to put it in the bot because it's generally so terrible. You really don't have to worry about it. He has as his replacement that his electricity is a useful thing in that situation. It acts as a better anti-air. It's just basically mash instead. And that's the move, therefore, you have to learn to deal with more often. But my suggestion is that if you find a Blanka that is used to playing Ken, is used to playing Balrog, is used to playing... What else can I think of that's really good with that crouch medium punch? Obviously Camille and Kareen. If for some reason those people said, you know, it's time I play some Blanka, you should disrespect their crouch medium punch most of the time. When they don't have meter, absolutely disrespect it. Until they prove that their spacing is so good that they have managed to frame trap you with that button, assume that they're just hitting what they normally hit with their other characters, and with Blanka in particular, it is a terrible idea to hit it. So you just get to frustrate them, or just at least keep yourself in a situation where you are not stuck defending based on that. It's a much easier visual cue to have lightning in your face, and since he can't easily lightning and then walk forward lightning again, in those situations you're probably fine. However, note that he can do lightning into a bunch of things, and that's a different matter altogether. Now, approaches to Blanka actually being in his electric state. These are a little trickier because it's very hard to get through Blanka's hitboxes in particular ways. You will almost always trade with him. The thing that will mostly surprise people is that you, in general, overheads don't trade with him. Which is an easy thing to remember when you're dealing with him overall. However, please note that if your overhead moves you too far forward, it won't generally work because you'll get hit by the electricity before you get into an active space, much like that. So I'm not really suggesting this as a main tactic. You should have some other stuff in case you need to. And generally, because he's plus, if you do block it, you shouldn't hit anything after it. Not necessarily because he will absolutely do something, but because anything you do that would hit him properly if he kept on using electricity, because he doesn't have to stop. At that range, you're probably not getting anything. He has a really good defense in that way. He's not specifically a defensive character, but he has some really good defensive tools when he's winning in neutral already. He can be at some disadvantage when he hits electricity at the far distant range and you don't get much off of it, but you still have to look out for some stuff. His stand heavy kick, which looks quite good and has been good in many games, that move there, is actually -5, so there's not a lot to worry about, but again, it gives him a very deceptive hurt box. Things you think are going to punish Blanka often will not. And that's partially what makes him, and Chun-Li, and to some extent Colleen, so important to deal with. Now it looks like Karine has a different button. Everyone should check and find what their button is. There's always something. There's almost always something, I should say. There's always something that you think to yourself, why would that hit through the electricity and nothing else? But there's usually something, and you need to find what that button is, similar to how you have to find it for Colleen. When Colleen is throwing out hail, there's usually a button, especially if she did it really close to you, that will get you through without getting hit by the hail. Blanka, similarly, in Karine's case, seems to have a button where he just gets hit by the shock. It's very important to know what this button is for this matchup as a generality. Because not only must you be able to hit it, you must be able to recognize when you shouldn't hit it because he's already been in that state for too long, or you shouldn't hit it because you're too close. The bot is therefore set up such that it has 3 situations in which it activates electricity. One where he does it after bouncing off you like that. One where he surprise forward hops past you and then does it, which you are supposed to learn to block. It is a cross up, you must block it as a cross up. And the third situation, which is much rarer, which is basically him starting his target combo, but I think that one only works in the other V trigger. So we may not end up using this V trigger, as I mentioned. It might limit what you can learn from the bot, but that might be character dependent. And it's certainly not enough of a limitation that you won't learn anything. So I'm basically here just looking to see, does this button actually work, and what range does it work at? It certainly seems to trade at some. That was too slow. Generally, Blanka is supposed to give you the feeling that you should not stand block against him, that you should crouch block to deal with his stuff. And because that's not actually true for the most part, it's not that... Blanka's glows are not that good. Specifically for that reason, I have not given him his slide. This is because normally when a character has a slide type move, we specifically tell you, here, learn all the spacings, learn all the punishes, make sure you can punish him at all these ranges and get cool stuff. Blanka, however, is, based on everything we can find, so negative on his Amazon River run, his low punching slide. He's so negative all of the time, unlike every other character who seems to have a way to eventually make this safe for themselves, or at least make you overcommit to like a 7-frame punish or something when you probably shouldn't, and get blocked and they get to get in if their spacing is right. So far, we haven't been able to get Blanka to be more than -7. If you're not too familiar with frame data, that basically means that every character we know except Alex and possibly Abigail. No, Abigail's worse too. Every character except Alex, and maybe one or two others that I'm not immediately thinking of, can just do this. And that move is almost always decently long range. And it's almost always going to be long enough range to punish his slide. Can you confirm off it? Well, if you want to put that in so you can learn your confirms, fine, but that's more of a boxer bot thing. The overall point is, while you should not necessarily count on being able to punish it with something huge, that normally doesn't happen anyway because Blanka's usually pretty far away from you. If he's spacing it correctly, he can end up a little bit far away from you, especially if you were walking backward and only crouch blocked at the last moment. So if you're not in time, or if you want to go, oh, he did a slide, I should sweep. If he's perfectly spaced, sweep might get blocked, but he's generally not far enough out that you can't do that. One of the things that makes the character so tricky is because you have to learn all of these different punishes. You can't use canned stuff. And therefore I've made an effort to put into the bot as many different situations that you need to have different responses for as possible. That's useful to see. Does that work all the time? Because that is a really useful defense to have against him. So for Kareen, and possibly for many other characters in fact, depending on the range, if Blanka does his roll and ends up far away from you, it might be in your best interest to do that. I'm not sure my timing was good enough. It might at least be a decent option because it prevents him from doing any more charge. Might need to walk forward though. So we'll be testing that out a bit and figuring out whether or not it's a good idea. That didn't come up as a counter hit, and it didn't really come up as a punish. Definitely worth some investigation. However, there is another reasoning why this may be important. For example, it could entirely be that Blanka's regular crouch has a hurt box that move can hit, and his electric move does not. You never are absolutely sure. That one, of course, was a counter hit. So obviously the aim with most prototype bots is to find as much as possible. Oh, maybe he gets hit because he's in his recovery, his special recovery animation or something. He generally won't be blocking after that with the bot, but that's not really the point because you need to see some range stuff. Looks like there's a little walk forward required in order to make that work. Moving on to that, obviously he has his command throw, but we made it an effort not to make it too obvious or that he's constantly trying to do it. It's similar to our other command throw bots where they'll just do it suddenly and you're like, why did that happen? This doesn't normally happen. Primarily to make you get caught off guard. Because Blanka he has some good deep jumps, but he doesn't have any really difficult to anti-air jumps. I did give him both his raid jump. In fact, we were unable to find at this time an input that will give him the attack, which is basically a launcher. But since most of your bot things for new characters, and especially this type of character, are focused on defense, and not being interrupted in your own offense by opponent options, I considered it relatively safe to leave him that way. So while he does very, very occasionally use his V skill. You can't even see it because it's so strongly hidden. And from there go into his raid jump, which is the kick follow-up from that move. Generally, you won't see him do the launcher. It's usually a move where if it was going to hit you, you were close enough to punish it. So, and it seems to be a relatively simple punish, therefore it was not prioritized. I'll double check on that, and if you have any information that tells me otherwise, then I'll do what I can to get it in. He does have his EX electricity as well, so you can somewhat learn to identify them, but we didn't make any effort for that to be different overall. So before I start getting into parts of content that really should be in a disc guidance stream, we'll consider that to have covered the main things that you want to see when you are trying to figure out what to do with the BlankaBot, and if you're testing it out, what goals you want to be focused on. If you're not familiar enough with the game to understand that specifically, those are some basic goals. Telling the difference between his two different roll attacks, dealing with the upward rainbow roll style attack when he does it. You won't see his up roll much. He does have it, but it's not very common. And defending yourself when he uses surprise forward and ends up in weird places. There's probably going to be a fourth one somewhere in there, but exactly what that is usually doesn't manage to get fully decided until the end of the week. So for now, I'll show off a couple other things with Colleen while waiting for matches. Sorry for anyone who faces me today and basically gets server rage quit on. And I'm going to change him back to Jungle Dynamo now, and you get to see all of the other things that that causes the bot to be able to do. It does actually take away one or two things he does naturally, but it shouldn't be too terrible. Tap data back off. We'll let it rot with the 4 to 5 today. Ask as always. Yeah, sure. So for parry and counter players, one thing to understand is that the way your parry normally interacts with Blanka's electricity might be useful in particular ways. Oh, as you can see, obviously he throws more when he's in this form, but I'm not really sure why as yet, so I'm not gonna be comfortable saying that's a thing that always happens. So as you can see, his electricity changes in this mode. He steps forward for some reason when he is in V trigger. He also has the capacity, under some condition, to actually charge up ground shape rolling. But the overall aspects of the character haven't changed. The overall aspects of what you're aiming for also didn't change. And I forgot to actually turn on the fight progress settings. Apply. Wait, no, I didn't set which one I wanted. Casuals. Apply, and we'll see what we get. You should also look out to see if your character has two moves that are done with opposite directions on the controller, where one of them stops Blanka from approaching from the front and the other stops Blanka's cross-ups. This is actually a lot more common than you'd think for a lot of the cast. Even if you have to like press a different button, sometimes it will help you, depending on how you're... There's usually some option select somewhere. Obviously charged characters have some problems, and he's good at picking apart other charged characters, but a lot of them use their down charge more so than anything, which makes it so you don't even have to worry about it. Fang, I think, is the one who would probably have the biggest problem, because Fang has no specific move that will deal with Blanka going to the other side of him and Fang reacting with a move, as far as I can tell. I don't know how that matchup is going to specifically be, but I can't imagine it being too good for Fang in the long run. On the other hand, if he can get out, Blanka might have some trouble getting in. It depends mostly on how Surprise Forward interacts with Ryobenda. I could test it.
Round 1. Fight.
Angel 15. Okay, this opponent will in fact go for the... after that. And it's very buttonsy. Cool. I never remember if that particular overhead counts as airborne. So as usual, my fighting style is mostly about downloading the opponent as I go. This person does a lot of stuff which is good in the long term, but won't really help if I start to defend properly. But you know, I don't like defending. That's a good mix up there. It doesn't lead to a lot of damage though. That one's equally good. Well, I had a match and it didn't immediately disconnect at the end despite me losing, so let's hope. The main thing that makes the Colleen match difficult for Nash, because this is actually in my favor, you just can't see it yet, is that Nash has to make a lot of preemptive actions. I mean a ton of them. Whereas Colleen basically can do as she likes. If my opponent defends really well and I get like too antsy and decide, I'm hitting buttons because you're in my space and I get to hit buttons now, then they can end up in some trouble. For example there. I'm actually surprised that one hit because I thought I was supposed to be the other way. A little weird. There's the jump back that I mistimed. But the main thing that this opponent gets to do has more to do with my very low success rate lately at airborne parries. Because that should have been parried. It's not even like it's hard to do. But for me, apparently, it's hard to do lately. Your defense is good though, so it's gonna hold up probably for a while. The reason you can jump at Nash is because, as much as I understand why Bonchan is not, like, into this character, because his anti-airs, while they are consistent, are really undamaging compared to what he's probably used to. So you can literally jump at Nash from particular ranges when you have certain amounts of health, just to make him waste the meter, and so that you don't get caught in any big combos and die. Because Nash is very good at the catch you in big combo into super and now you're dead. Not specifically because his setup off of his super is that great, but because if he does get you with it, he's so good at staying away from you for the rest of the round with the life lead that you might as well be stressed out anyway. So I should be working on my high counters, and that match was perfect because fortunately Blanka forces you to do that. Because all of those are airborne. Now, doing that on reaction is hard. Because he's going to make you twitch and flinch and all those things. But eventually you can get it done. But all of those are airborne. Somehow this is easier to me in other games. I don't know. I can do this with Blue Mary all day, but Colleen for some reason is difficult. Presumably because I spent years building up the tendency to do it with Mary. Or because I just do hers from forward. I should probably try doing Colleen's from forward. It's entirely possible that that sort of tiny thing can mess you up in these games. Especially if you've been playing many games for many years. Ah, here we are. Nostalgia Blanc on top of that. So let's see what level this person is first of all. Okay, so we're looking at Super Bronze Blanka, level 15, Big Al. Let's give a shout out to Big Al. Hopefully he will give us something to look at, and my connection will make that possible. Don't fail me now, come on. Here we go. So obviously having actually spent personal time against the bot of all of like 3 hours, I now have to deal with all this. Okay, I expected the fake out, which is partially my problem here. There's the fake out. So the character is not so good when you don't do certain specific mix-up things. Reversal EX, pretty good. I really could have afforded to do that. I could have afforded to do that too. There's a slide I was basically just saying that one should not normally, but my point there is not really that you shouldn't get caught by the slide, but rather that you don't need to learn a specific punish for when you do manage to defend against it. If you need to see the slides often enough to catch them mentally, understand the spacing, there are some variants I think we can use for the bot that will allow you to deal with that move specifically. And that should be able to help you move forward. And there's the thing I mentioned before, where you can't be sure how moves will interact with surprise forward. Now, note that surprise back is effectively Blanka's backdash, but there is a downside to that. There are quite a few downsides to that, actually. And being able to use that against him is something I want to consider putting into the bot, but there's not a lot of spacing for it, so I'm going to have to think about how to get that done. Saw it coming, but went too early, in fact. That move is a good mix-up, and you are going to see it for sure. The bot does have it though, so. So I'm specifically playing with Colleen because I know that the amount of training I need to do on how to counter what is going to keep on making my life relatively miserable. Right, let's try doing it from forward. And I hit the wrong thing. But still overall better. Why is it better? I don't know. I'll work on that. I did not specifically give him crouch light kick into electricity because you can't do anything about it anyway, so it's not really as if it matters. His stuff into shock is the combo you don't need to understand how to deal with because you can't do anything about it if your opponent does it right. And if they do it wrong, but you happen to still be blocking, you still get nothing out of it. That is clearly... that hit me as a counter hit, so presumably that's a mid. And that's a good pullback, so we'll see some more of that in a bit, assuming I get the rematch. Can't read it, fix it Capcom. This is my only complaint right now, given that my matches are not dropping, so I have no complaints with the game other than that I can't read the cool things. Oh well. So, did I see anything from that that inspires me to change the bot? At the moment, I'm going to go with no. There were definitely some obvious combos, but bots don't generally contain combos that you can't stop. Sometimes they contain combos that if your opponent drops the combo, the move is unsafe enough that you should be able to react to the fact that they dropped it. But Blanka is generally not like that. Either the move is going to hit in a way that a roll will where you already have to deal with it, or nothing like that will happen at all. Now there's why our second V-trigger is important. Because it looks a lot like his regular moves, but acts totally different. That mix-up is going to be similar to Birdie's, but better, because Blanka can do that from much closer without risking missing. And he has so many unique animations, it's hard to tell exactly what's going on sometimes. You don't know if to react because he's gone up into the air, or block because he's gone up into the air. And obviously that is why the bot was given this ability. That is almost unreactable. I won't call it unreactable, I'm pretty sure I can do it like that. Yes, Ashley. But you have to be really, really expecting it. And basically refusing to do anything else, which means you're going to get thrown. No thank you. Although I should have tested that, honestly. But if you're really familiar, if you've been practicing it with the bot for a really long time, and you play Colleen or a similar character, there is a chance that he might be able to surprise forward pass you, go for a shock, and be countered. And since everything he can do from there should be, well no, maybe not. If he was walking forward at the time, he might in fact be able to get something. Oh good, let's try. So, you saw I set 4 to 5, it gives me a 3. This usually means, because of a whole bunch of network stuff, this usually means that the connection shouldn't be too terrible. If your own connection is spotty, when you see 3 bars, it generally means this will be bad. If your connection is really good, when you see 3 bars, it's probably going to be okay. You could take the risk if you really want to play and haven't had a match in a while. So we've got another Blanka, a little bit lower on the actual LP, but I really don't consider that to make much difference. There's effectively tiers of play in Street Fighter. And when a new character comes out, you never know who's just going to gel with the new character. Maybe there's someone on the way up proving that they can go from 0 to 16, whatever. So, obviously Blanka doesn't have that option strongly against Colleen because it doesn't really matter which role he does, all of them are countered in the same way. And the fake out takes so long that if she counters early, she doesn't normally get hurt. So I'm not really concerned at this point relative to that. But as you can see, the lag isn't honestly that bad on my side. Remember, that is a part of the, I guess we'll call it Kagemusha. I don't know what they actually call that server code. But the rollback netcode is meant such that most of the time, and did not manage in time, most of the time if you have the good connection, you're not going to be the one suffering the rollback. Most of us don't want to hear that because it implies stuff about our connection, but obviously this is not true when the rollback is terrible. But you know, I'm talking about 3-bar stuff on a good day. So the easy answer to this tactic that we're seeing is actually just to throw these out. Ah, I did too much. Blanka is actually fairly well suited for defending against Colleen, but he's not so good at attacking her because of the spacing on screen. I won't call this matchup bad for him, but it definitely is more so they both defend and Colleen generally defends better. And this means that Blanka has to mix up Colleen relatively well in order to get through. She has a lot of complex hurt boxes which allow her to get out of the way of a ton of weird stuff. And that's basically your best option, I think. Because it will beat her from doing a bunch of different things. And it looks sufficiently like other stuff that the player is more likely going to try to counter it or block it rather than hitting a button to get out of it. Nope, I flinched. I'm willing to do that primarily because, at least I was willing to do that. I was willing to do that primarily because I don't take enough damage from those to make me discouraged from the payoff of hitting the counter, say, the 3rd time I do it. Because I get the good knockdown, and he doesn't have much on that. And now that I can read it, the person doesn't have a specific Colleen response. Oh well. As you can see, I'm back to 5 bars. Because I usually that little ping dip is somewhere else. It is not a good idea to actually do that against Colleen, but I just didn't get to demonstrate on the bot why you shouldn't do it. I thought I was gonna... Okay, that doesn't hit. That means he has good evasive air hitboxes too. Good wake up buttons. I was going for the throw, so it made more sense than anything else. If you're going to try to counter him on reaction, don't try to counter him on reaction. Because for example, in that moment, I actually did press it in time, but the counter, as fast as it is, the opponent was already in my face by that time. However, it is useful for another thing. Because Colleen is so good at this, functionally, you have a relatively high chance that you'll get the opponent to think you want to counter it, and therefore be willing to do it so that they can get you. This allows you to walk into the space where Colleen can use her V skill safely, because Blanka's punishes for it are not that great. Ah, why did I hit crouch? Oh, right, Chun-Li. And again, really need to fix that. Had to confirm that one, so... And I messed that up. Oh, well, it didn't really matter if I lost that round. Oh well. I did a little bit too much work. I think that's the most clean possible response to Blanka. That was well done. I like that one. So as noting before, I'm actually going to use the full strategy now because we're in this round. Optimally, I can do this because Blanka's movement will cause Colleen to generally get that. There's not much he can do. He will end up going over, I think, in no matter which button he presses, actually. Wake up throw. Good stuff. I'm wondering sometimes if I'm really just too obvious. Oh, sorry. Laggy. You good now? Well, good enough, I suppose. I really need to rethink that button. But it is Sandbag, so you do have to get used to it in that regard. I think that's probably my largest challenge between the two characters, the fact that their crouch heavy punch does such completely different things. Now, you do have the ability to dash punish a bunch of Blanka stuff. Stun? There we go. It was a weak stun, so I sort of mashed out, but not in time. Long confirm. His opponent appears to be willing to use their heavy punch roll, which means I could probably just block it. Which is what I was mentioning before. So, if we're just talking basic matchup stuff, try to convert whatever I'm saying to your own character. If you have a move that can clip him from fairly far out, walk forward and hit it. However, please note that not every move will actually beat Blanka's roll, and that's probably the more important thing to know. That is not throwable. Good to know. But again, the reason why it's not in the bot, that is a fairly easy piece of information to get. Right. I did it right and then hit the wrong counter. Okay, I have to do so much work on that. Very well then. And the lag is going to make this dumb. Well, I'm sorry it got laggy at those moments, but it held up. For a inconsistent connection, it held up pretty well. So you can take it from someone who has been basically unable to play this game consistently for basically a month, given this when AE came out. They probably smoothed out the server bugs. If you're still seeing problems, you were probably having problems before AE, but let them know honestly, because speaking as someone who has at least some experience with networks, it's really hard to trace these things without a relatively decent idea of where you are. You don't have to be like demanding that they fix it if you don't really want to be causing trouble, quote unquote. But, you know, some little thing, I can't play this game, I live here, my ISP is this. If you have time, look into it. I didn't bother with that because I know very well that one, it was always good before, and two, my ISP can be really weird. But having effectively recognized, yeah, it's probably not the ISP. At this point, we're moving forward. So as for why you shouldn't just electricity in neutral against Colleen. There are some things that are just bad ideas as a generality. 4 bars. Let's see, this is probably stable. We'll see what we get out of it. But overall I was saying, oh look, the other electric Brazilian. The other green electric Brazil, the other green, wait, no, never mind, I'm not making that joke. So we have a Sway Lara, a level 49 Sway Lara. I haven't played Lara versus Colleen in a while. Despite having Omni Rabbit to train with, again, net was a little weird, busy with various things, and Colleen isn't really a match that he needs a lot of practice in, because the interaction is very, very deep. There's a whole bunch of tiny interactions that make up this match rather than I'm messing up this thing and need to fix it. But mostly, Lara and Colleen interact based in foot. She's the only character who should be able to play footsies with Colleen, but the way she plays footsies with Colleen is because she has the ability to do both clap at certain ranges and EX Sunset Wheel. EX Wheel makes it so that using Hail in this matchup is a terrible idea. EX Bolt covers the same situation in almost all cases. So what's your best bet? Your best bet is to watch your opponent's tendencies long enough to figure out where they hit buttons and then counter them, because Lara doesn't deal well with Colleen countering. The other option is to use your own overhead to mess with her, because Lara players are generally not expecting a lot of overhead stuff. And it moves you in ways that mess up her movements. Aw, that was bad. But like I said, there's a ton of tiny interactions that make this match difficult. However, the main reason I'm doing that is to stop the Lara player from feeling comfortable in certain spaces. Because it's much more important to make Lara uncomfortable than it is to do damage. It's when you make her uncomfortable that you're able to finally figure out where the person is likely to hit buttons without you specifically dying from the fact that they hit the buttons. The other thing is that if they're defensive enough, which this person does not appear to be, thankfully for them, you can get a lot out of that. So, what have I learned about this person's tendencies when they get nervous so far? Not a whole lot. I know that they... Oh, actual Brazilian Lara. Okay then.
Round 1. Fight.
But I do know one thing. Their concept of where to space themselves is reliant on needing to get in by jumping. You'll note that they've never dashed. They only do overheads at max range. So instead of doing anything like that, I should stay here and push myself to here. Because they don't know how to get in on me per se anyway. Okay, that test is that yes, they can do that properly. Messed up that part. But you'll notice, as I said, there's a ton of stuff they do that relies on them being at exactly that space. And it's probably an autopilot they have to do things at that space. Had I been ready to counter there, for example, it might have gone better for me. So in this case, it might look like the lag is the reason that I'm stressed out or losing. But really, this is entirely me failing to recognize when my opponent is likely to do that, and knowing how to make them nervous enough that they want to. They're going to start the empty jumping now, which is good, because then I can deal with some other stuff. Because as soon as they start empty jumping as a serious... Okay then. Then again, no, that does push my hurt box really far forward. So I deserve that. I might as well. I wasn't using the meter anyway. And it's going to be very similar for Blanka. You have to look for where the opponent stands to get certain things done. And why they want to. But as I said, the empty jump should be coming in now. Which is good because Laura doesn't actually get anti-aired by Colleen all that well. You actually have to do specific things to beat the empty jumps. Namely that. And you can't do that, as mentioned before. So that habit of mine is really bad in that I will tend to do it. Recognizing the range they're jumping from, therefore, is probably the most important part of this matchup at the moment. However, I do know that range, and it's problematic for them that I know it. If you're feeling discouraged about not actually winning matches, don't really stress about that. Focus on whether or not you're understanding how you were supposed to win the match, because that you can practice. And honestly, I can note that if I'm only having this much lag to Brazil, I'm probably okay unless this person's internet is super good somehow. Right, I forgot the part that was important. Okay, I'll go back to that. And then that sets that up. And that sets that up. And that sets that up. Should have done the other one. And then I should be able to do that. Oh, but they did not actually do that. I am very, very impressed and surprised that they did not hit a button after that. Because the amount of calm to not hit a button after that, having had the round they had, says a lot. Now that that move is weaker in many ways, you have to be much more careful about when you use it. Make sense? Now the one thing this lets me do is that for a very short time now, if I can manage to defend myself, I get to throw hail. And being able to throw hail at that spot matters a lot in this matchup. And now I can't throw hail anymore, but it's fine. My spacing on that is actually bad, but I've shifted it because this particular player has such a good concept of where they need to stand relative to that. I would have to be able to parabellum them on, like, reaction, which is not likely to happen. I think also because the move has become... In order for that move to become -8, now, it probably means that it has been changed in such a way that even my properly spaced version is now more minus than it was before. And if that's true, then I can see a lot of why the complaints about the nerfs to Colleen's V skill would have been so. It sounds like the sensible thing to do because it was really difficult to deal with, because only the Colleen player has a very good idea of where they're standing relative to you. And you can't just say, well, let me move around. Because charged characters don't really have that option against her because they can't play footsies. They'll possibly get clipped for massive damage. Therefore, probably worth dealing with in that way. So back to the bot and hopefully some moments to demonstrate what I was talking about before. As for me, I'm personally learning to do the high counter by thinking about the high counter as a triple button and the mid counter as a double button. Because otherwise, I'm going to be at this forever. And no one wants that. Thank you, Blanka. And that's why you don't do that. This is actually true for every character that does parry style things in this game except Ryu. And I'm not sure it's not true for Ryu's V-trigger parry. I know it's not true for his regular parry. Ryu's regular parry functionally moves his hurt box back and puts the parry box where he was. Whereas Colleen's moves something forward, as you've just seen, and I don't think it changes her hurt box. It doesn't pull it back, which is probably fair because if it pulled her hurt box back, there are a lot of times where it would become easier to react to things that probably should be risky. Whereas Ryu has to do a reactive thing afterwards anyway, so it's fine. Colleen's is a matter of understanding the opponent. The skill in actually executing the parry is probably not that big. As I said, I may be bad at it at the moment, but that's not because the move is hard, it's because I'm bad at the moment. I learned from some matches the other day that might have been on stream, in fact, I think some of them were, that her light kick is the best thing in the world. Well, second best thing. The sheer unfairness of that button can put a lot of things in this game to shame, and I really did not expect you to be alive after that. But Mika's a tough gal, so there we go. I'm expecting a jump. Why am I expecting a jump? That was not the jump. Decent. Right, so they're currently in the state where they expect me to attack a lot, because I have been attacking a lot. So defending is a reasonable response for them to have. Not going for the super there. Pretty sure it would not have done my job. Oh, it was, they did jump. Now Colleen can get out of that, but I don't like doing it the way it's supposed to be done. It feels unfair and unsafe. Both of those things at the same time is a bad combination. I don't know what to call that. Stylish I'll go with, but I don't feel as if it was intentionally stylish. So, a beautiful fluke. Yes, let's call it that.
Round one.
Opponent's got some good defensive spacing style stuff, but their jumps are bad. And I haven't been taking advantage of that yet. The main reason I say their jumps are bad is because if I hit a footsie button while they're jumping, I usually have time to defend. That's usually a sign that your jumping is bad. If your opponent is trying to play footsies and your jumps are being blocked, that's better. Wonder what made you think I was going to jump. Good stuff though. So I'll play it there too. It makes the execution for the counter when I expect the cross up also difficult, so that's not fun. Oh, wait, no, I messed up that meeting. I'm pretty sure that works naturally. I wonder if I can beat that the other way. Because they've been consistent with it and it's been really good, but it seems like I should be able to counter it on their wake up. Alright, hail time. Ooh, good jump. So as I said, they've learned that I will defend in particular ways and that they can get away with jumping a lot, and that I will push on them enough without using any of the moves that would actually make that difficult for them, that defending is probably their better option here. How do I resolve that? Mostly dash up throw until they're annoyed. I really need to start doing the thing I said was unfair, just because. I'm really surprised you went for that kick.
You win.
So, a couple other basic notes for dealing with Blanka on characters that don't have counters, obviously. And I should probably switch to Chun-Li just to display the issue that charged characters are likely to have and the amount of effort that certain ones will have to put into it. Or I will test some stuff on Fang, actually. I think I've had enough matches for the day, probably. It didn't turn out to be too much of a Sandbag casual stream, but you got a bit. So, since this is unlikely to be covered in this guidance itself, given that we will be focusing on what the actual inputs are, why they are that way, how they interact with each other, and what you should be trying to do to get the bot in, let's go take a look at some of the weirder interactions in the game. I wouldn't necessarily have spent a lot of time on this because, obviously, Fang players should generally know the hardships they have to go through anyway. But there are some things that playing Fang will let you know about how this should go. The only thing that would help you more is realizing whether or not you can command grab him out of certain things easily. But if you can't normal grab him, you can't command grab him, so you could still test this on pretty much any character.
Experience the wild the hard way.
Yeah, let's keep that one. The whole projectile having a hitbox thing might matter. The bot also made sure to have the EX forward roll, which means that while it does not naturally go through, it does naturally go through in some form, V-trigger I believe. So let's see what Fang does, specifically when this is his option. Well, that was a V-trigger version, so we don't specifically know yet. Shocking. And that's our information so far. Since that is functionally a projectile with a projectile hitbox, we can see that if Fang does get Blanka out, this is going to be frustrating. But there's an interaction. I'm pretty sure that Fang actually nearly got that Ryobenda down, which means that Blanka's hitbox reaches far enough that Fang has to worry about him getting to him at the moment. However, I can probably get him to use the surprise forward on more of a timing by changing one of the inputs and see therefore if he will actually get through by using that rather than waiting for him to naturally do it. But we're still here for now. Come on, Blanka, you can just hop. It's cool. Now you're going to try to roll again. But, there we go. So, in this matchup is a fairly easy decision as to how Blanka should be using his meter. Blanka simply waits for Fang to put down Ryobenda and uses his meter to get through it if he can. But since he has to be in V-Trigger already, it's one of those matchups where the choice of which V-Trigger to use is fairly easy to make, at least on the Blanka side. And functionally for Fang, probably as well. Although he has more options, understanding how you want to play the matchup yourself can decide that for you, rather than specifically you having to figure out that optimal one. But it isn't, I could play either and be equally successful. Your style of Fang probably determines which V-Trigger you use against Blanka, and it won't be like changing based on the Blanka, which is the other way it works. Sometimes you change your V-Trigger because your opponent's style is different. I don't foresee a lot of situations in which you as a Fang player have already decided which of your two V-Triggers you want to use against this character, and then find someone who makes you want to change it. Because his approach vectors are not necessarily linear, but the way that they work keeps you from needing that. And as we can see with Fang here as well, because of the way that the hitbox on Ryobenda is, you can really just throw these out a lot of the time. There's not a lot of things I can see here, aside from possibly Blanka's raid jump, which make him particularly well suited for getting past this. So, based on that, I'm going to turn off the two inputs that are based in giving him his charge. And you'll get to see a little bit of that behavior. It'll tend to cause him to do a lot more electricity and such. That's a triple kick. Good. Triple kick, yeah. Now, because of certain aspects of the inputs, he will still always be able to do that. Either that or I switched around what I think it was. But maybe not. 4 needed to be on. 5 was the triple kick one, or did I move it? No, 5 must be the triple kick. So possibly I switched around 3 and 2. Let's see what 3 says it is. No, 3 is definitely a charge. Note that depending on how you input 4, you can run it like this and the rolls will just come out anyway. And I clearly need to double check on your 4 input a bit. Let's see what it was. Did I break it? Possibly. Fortunately, That is also part of how bots are supposed to work, so I suppose it's convenient that I end up showing this off now. There's usually one input in one of our bots that is supposed to be able to be changed to whatever you feel like. Normally we try to put this in action 5, but there are two ways to approach it. If the bot has a lot of things you could change a little bit, and most of the inputs are easy and one of those inputs is hard, we put that input in 5 because you get so used to the idea of, okay, I struggled with this a lot for this bot, I'm not going to redo it. It's the 5th one, I struggled. Or you get, oh, that 5th one was easy, and that helps to connect in your mind whether or not you need to care. This input is troublesome because it requires you to hit that on the first frame. Let's see what we got now. And when it's done perfectly, as you can see, he doesn't actually do anything. If you're really, really good at it, he jumps, but he doesn't do any kick or V-trigger move either. So now, I'm going to run in this way. That input is supposed to be more complicated than that. If you've looked at our inputs, you'll see that. But you can generally have 2, 4, and 5 on and see what happens. But the thing I care about here is getting him to use that move to try to get through Ryubenda, to give you the last piece of information on how it treats certain things. Therefore, well, that helped, but probably not the timing I was looking for to figure out the answer. As you can see, he's much more aggressive in this form generally. And there's our answer. He does not, in fact, go through Ryubenda with surprise forward, meaning that this matchup is basically as advertised. I won't say prepare to suffer as Blanka because it's fairly obvious how to deal with some of this. And because your moves are so easy to push, and that might give you some breathing room, I certainly wouldn't be rushing myself. Let me make one more attempt at getting that basically right. I think the version we gave in the Protobot is actually just that and does not have any other parts. Yeah, actually, that's what we gave, so you can make him have a down back charge if you're really fast. It's generally frustrating to attempt to input this if you're not really ready. And you have to hold the medium kick until the end, which I'm not really sure I did, actually, but we'll see what happens. But I honestly don't expect to see much difference in the behavior of the bot. I expect to see a couple more jumps. And cool jump ins. And that'll be about it. Which you probably should learn to deal with anyway. But if you decide that you don't really care about jump ins, that you know how to anti-air Blanka, feel free to mess with that input, the 4th one in this case. If there's some mix-up you know, you've seen, you got beat by, and you want to put it in, while still having a functional BlankaBot to give you the stress of the rest of it, absolutely use Action 4 and put it in there, and get whatever you can. The thing he will lack, if you don't use that one, and the thing he's been lacking all this time, I'll note, is up ball, which, while useful to deal with, because you might as well learn to punish it, is relatively easy to punish. Him having that doesn't specifically enhance the bot unless it's the ES version, and even then, it depends a lot on your character. So what I expect we will do is suggest that you use your own variant for this. We might suggest some, but for different characters with different challenges against Blanka, that 4th slot is where you can put in whatever you think will make your life hardest. So for Fong, I really don't have that much more that needs to be said. And I'm pretty sure that this guidance, while it won't cover our normal marathon of characters because it will be from this side and I'll be the one demonstrating mostly, you're still definitely going to see some Bison, some Chun-Li. So I'm not in a rush to show off the charge character stuff at this point. So the other basic piece of information that anyone can generally need about this character, let's review quickly. For example, Rashid doesn't have anything specific that you need to understand. Mika, you might care how he interacts with Mike stuff. And I'll run that while I do some other going through mentally. But the main characters I would say that you need to check for specific things on with the bot. Once again, if you have a different character than most people and are interested in using it, the characters I think you're most likely to get little use out of it and might need to give us some information are grapplers. Because the bot is really very heavily based on how far away you are from him at any given time. And the specific way that you interact with him based on that changes a lot. Well, that's the obvious clip. I'd say that's probably not in Blanka's favor right there. His main thing is that once he gets to the other side of Mika, he becomes stressful. But apparently, that doesn't deal with the situation either. She can basically mic through electricity, and for some reason the electricity going on doesn't seem to do much about that. Maybe the electricity loses hits after a while. After the first hit, it loses its hit property or something. It's a useful thing to know if you're a Mika player. If you're afraid of getting zapped, just put on the mic and go for it. What to do after the mic is a different question. Given the way Blanka normally works as a character, you won't have enough time to do too much. And once he's in V-trigger, he has multiple hits on that, so you do have some issues to deal with on the rainbow one. But that's probably the most important thing you needed to know. If Blanka is in the air when you hit him with the mic, what do you follow with? I figured that the ES wingless might work, but it's probably easier to just go for the tried and true. There's no real reason I can think of why ES Peach would not be the better response. Blanka takes long enough to come out of electricity that you could probably use that to defend yourself from that cross-up and still manage in time. The problem will be that you obviously will never manage to actually hit him with it and therefore will always be unsafe. But depending on which move your opponent hits and the timing they use to get to the other side of you, you might get something out of it still. If you have enough health and he's relatively far out, I won't say don't use this, because by the time he deals with it, you probably have something. Also note that, for whatever reason, it appears that when he hits you is much earlier into things, and because his hit block stun is so long, but the block stun itself is negated, you have a lot of time. But you don't have enough time to do anything but combo off it. So there's that. Do your best with it overall. But you don't need to fear electricity. Mika fears no electricity. Mika fears no anything really, but maybe bears a little bit. No. I think she's basically story verified she doesn't fear bears either. Or at least if she fears them, she doesn't do anything about it. Okay, heavy kick does not juggle. This is presumably because the juggle points on most EX moves are higher than normals by far. So, you can similarly think of other armored or semi-armored V-trigger stuff in the same way. Looks like the cancel on that is a little bit harder than I thought though. So I'm expecting similar sorts of things from Zangief, which is who I wanted to test. And given that Blanka seems to be on the ground most of the time, I wouldn't suggest going for wingless, even though it probably works when you time it perfectly. There's also no reason I can see to make it so. And it looks like he's probably able to move out of the way in time to gouge the hit stun for other stuff, so... But you can't just hit Mike because he'll obviously be able to do the rainbow one if he's in V-trigger at the time. I don't think it works if he's not. In fact, the recovery of his stuff is so long that you messing up does not seem to mean that Blanka will get anything. If Blanka just rolls at you and you release after the roll, it doesn't look like he has much time to do anything about it. He might get ES up ball from certain spaces. I'll leave it to someone who has more understanding of Mika's timing than me to verify the timings for that particular quote-unquote punish. But I would say that Guts in the face of a jungle beast is, as always, Mika being true to form. Also, one final point that's super important for all characters that has probably not been changed, I will double check on it. Blanka used to be able to stop his electricity and restart it without leaving that stance based on a very specific input. It's a very high level input, however. Even if he still has it, I would not suggest putting a lot of effort into dealing with it. In other words, if you have an armored move or something that will prevent you from taking damage from the shock, if he does in fact lose the hitbox and he can't functionally hit you anymore by shocking more, at least with the regular version, I doubt that he can then do more electricity. The reason this is meaningful is because he doesn't seem to have a lot of other plus moves. Which means that once you have managed to do that, you should be okay. You can just armor through or parry or whatever it is that lets you get away from that move, and then block. And whatever he hits to keep himself safe, you can probably deal with.
Experience the wild the hard way.
We'll use Cossack Muscle simply because Cossack Muscle is more entertaining. Although I probably should have checked the other one to see if Vacuum Effect works on him being in electric mode. But it shouldn't have any reason why not, because it counts as a hit. And it counts as a hit where Zangief probably can't trade with it. As you can see, for Zangief, because this will not only last fairly long, but also has a specific timing, there are two ways to deal with this. Zangief can keep on doing that, and as you can see, the same situation I was just talking about seems to happen. I can't test fully because it is a bot, but you can always use something else or replace the same fourth input whenever you need to test new Blanka stuff. I'm relatively confident that just absorbing one hit of the electricity will stop you from taking any more damage from it. So you can see the clear problem with this setup. Also, for all of you Zangief fans who are not completely aware of how to do a bunch of reversal stuff for this character, because 360 seem really hard, please remember that while you're in block stun, holding up does nothing. So, functionally, just occurred to me to mention it in case anyone ever wants to pick up a 360 style character. If you really want to punish someone who is doing a long move at you on this character, hold up and then do a perhaps circle back and you're done. It takes a while to get used to, obviously. But if you're good at like telling the block stun timing, you can do a ton of stuff like this. The other thing is that it gets you a lot of moves. Just have to make sure not to hold it for too long. Just general advice, you'll get it if you have problems with playing Zangief, but can play other grapplers. 360s are hard to do in certain situations, but this is generally not one of them. Your main problem with Blanka is that Blanka simply isn't usually there to be SPD'd in the first place. However, here's our question. When Cossack Muscle is active, then does it become possible? No, it looks like in his standard motion, he's too far out for that to make any difference. So let's try light SPD only. Pretty sure it was a heavy one on his part. Actually, maybe not. Maybe the heavy one is the one that you whiff on. That might be sad. That was EX. Obviously not going to work because that's also EX. That's also probably worth a thought. Could he manage it? Instant air burst dynamite is probably beyond most people's easy execution tier, but it might be worth considering. Of course, I believe this would only work on the heavy and therefore you'd have to care. But that's just a matter of holding up forward instead and waiting a little longer to do the same thing I was just talking about. So, if you feel as if you can't do anything with Zangief, it's probably that the execution required to punish Blanka's stuff is a little harder. Because the timing, there are some things that are in this game relatively hard execution purely because the timing is not what you'd expect of it. But Zangief basically becomes the character who can punish basically any Blanka role, I believe. There are a couple other characters that definitely can, but this matchup has always been a little weird in that regard. So if you're picking out Blanka, please remember that there will always be a Zangief somewhere who you must EX roll against. Not because this is easy to do, what I'm trying to do now, obviously. Even as someone who doesn't play the character, I can probably be sure that this timing is difficult because you have to wait until he starts to jump, which is not common. But for the Blanka player side, don't take it for granted that you can just do what you want here. In fact, if you're in the corner, you may not be able to do what you want at all. Fortunately, Zangief is not that strong at defending against those because I think you have to do like a straight up Borscht Dynamite, which is kind of hard. If they do mess it up, you can probably just hold down back and hit jab and hope things work out from the Blanka side. Also, there are some differences depending on where Blanka attempts to start the roll and whether or not he's in V-trigger. So there's a lot of little things to learn in this matchup when you are a grappler, especially a grappler who doesn't have a lot of space to do certain things. We may of course come up with variants specifically for grapplers, or even just specifically for Zangief, because that happens at times. Zangief, Abigail, they might have specific things. But note that Zangief's basic crouch heavy covers a lot of the situations you could run into. The main problem is timing it so that you actually hit. Can't just mash it, as mentioned earlier with Karim. Looks like the long one he does in fact get away, and it must have been the heavy standard one that was punishable easily. I will also note that that appears to be his medium up ball, and that means that his medium up ball at minimum range also gets punished by this. In fact, it might have been the thing that was being punished by it all along. So yes, lots of stuff to do from the grappler side. So if you are a grappler player, specifically a Zangief or Abigail player, definitely. Abigail doesn't have the same options, but he does have some powery stuff that came in relative to what I was discussing before, for example. And for the time being, we suggest using this bot on V-Trigger 1 to make it hard, because it changes enough of his stuff that you have to care. So hopefully that's enough to get you started on what BlankaBot is for. You can find the information on the inputs of the bot currently. What you're watching now, not necessarily have been watching. What you're watching now is basically the exact thing that has been given. I think there's a shift in the 5th input because there's some plinks in it that help him get the electricity out. You're likely to end up recreating some of these yourself anyway, so don't stress about it. Tune in on Friday for this guidance, where we will be going over every input in detail, what it's supposed to do, what it's supposed to look like, why it needs to be a certain way, and what you want to change about it in order to get that information. And stop by tomorrow for our Kami House lounges, CBFC beginners. Where you can get some basic tips on how to get started. Let's go with started for now. How to get started in Dragon Ball FighterZ. And as always, if you have any trouble understanding the terms used, please reference the glossary at 2-mk.org. That's all for tonight. Look forward to bot release on Sunday around 6 Eastern, probably give or take an hour. This has been Rillian for Team 2_MK. Good night, everyone.